more people can say more things to more people than ever in history, and that is still growing enormously.
The contemporary internet and the tools that make it up give us an immense opportunity to reorganize almost any aspect of our own lives.
So if you can create an encyclopedia with 1 million people who've never met, but the quality is just as good as Britannica, what else could you create?
There is this possibility of using these tools to do massive things, which is completely unexplored at the moment.
And we can work together in ways that ask a deeper question about the role of government.
There's a whole new model that's emerging where we become part of the government.
I think we've got the technology that any vote that's in Parliament could be offered to the entire country.
This is a very profound change. I'm not talking about people lobbying outside parties influencing government. I'm talking about unbundling and reconstituting what is a government.
A revolution doesn't happen when society adopts new tools. It happens when society adopts new behaviors. These tools have lowered the cost of doing things to the point where our desire to engage with one another is enough to get things now to happen at a very large social scale rather than just a sort of smaller family and friends scale.
My name is Eric. I'm 19 and I've never been overseas, and I'm going to be staying with Couchsurfers. Every face I see is completely alien to me, and I'm not really used to them.
This urge that we have to socialize, to connect, to be recognized, to have social status, that plays out in these technologies a lot more easily than it could in the world of, broadcast media or newspapers or mass communication in the 20th century sense of the term.
Public services are going to need to change the way in which they see people. They're going to need to find ways of tapping into people's own resources. They're going to need to find ways of connecting people to support one another in the way that sites like NetMums do.
It's a message board, basically. It can be a very lonely journey, parenting. It is all about loss of the community, I think, really. So to try and get that community spirit that would have been there so many years ago, we have to find some other way of doing it, and Mumsnet is probably the best way of doing that, I think.
Mumsnet builds on what mums have always done in playgrounds, in parks, in groups, but just takes that to a whole different level. I think it's a very impressive example of the way that the web can create large communities of informal knowledge and systematise that and make it very useful.
And so the question you have to ask yourself, given how active the users are, is Couchsurfing a small organization because it's got 7 formal employees, or is it a huge organization because it has this enormous number of collaborators? It's the same for Wikipedia, it's the same question for Flickr, it's the same question for YouTube.
I'm going to be meeting my Couchsurfing host, Alan. I've never met him before except online. He'll be hosting me for 2 nights. There's a lot of unknowns.
The old model of social trust and anointed experts is one of only many, many patterns in which society can both exhibit trust and gain value from those relationships. And we're seeing the other patterns reestablish themselves.
At the moment, I'm on my way to go and meet 4 people who I've never met before, apart from online, all Mumsnet posters. I don't really know that much about them, apart from they've all got babies.
Get yourself comfy. So what's your name again? Jen. Hi.
What we're actually beginning to see is people putting their faith in a different kind of professionalism.
The amount of times you read threads about health visitors or some healthcare professional that's given absolutely ridiculous advice.
They undermine your own confidence, and I think that's what Mumsnet gives you back. Elliot's quite...
People trust the mothers they meet on Mumsnet because they've been mums, not because they're health visitors or social workers or whatever. And so I think there is something about who do we trust.
You don't mind me joining you?
No, of course not.
This is Joshua, by the way.
It's not as dangerous as you would think. I'm not too worried about what he's going to be like.
There is clearly an issue of safety and trust. Of course it can be unsafe at the margins, and of course there are predators and charlatans.
Hi, Elaine.
Eric?
Yeah, how's it going?
What's really interesting about anything like this, any system that tries to apply rules to human behaviour leaves itself open to being gamed. It's scary, not everybody can cope with it.
Hello.
Hey.
How are you?
I'm well, how are you?
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you as well.
Hello.
All right, so this is your place?
Yes, 94.
But I think if you show trust, then what tends to happen is that you reduce the incentive to game the system substantially. So just by being open and showing trust, you can actually protect yourself.
The flat is quite small, as you could see. Over there is restrooms.
Okay.
And I usually share my time with the kitchen and the couch surfer. Is this your first time in London, in Europe?
Yeah, actually, first time in Europe, first time pretty much out of North America.
What are your first impressions so far?
It's another world.
If you want to use the phone, call someone. I have Skype.
There are ways in which we can trust one another. Critically, the Couchsurfing site doesn't just work by turning up addresses of random strangers in remote countries. It actually has a number of mechanisms in it, as do many of these services, eBay perhaps most famously with the reputation market. It has a number of mechanisms. I trust sharing things with you if you and I may share again in the future, or if we know someone in common. And all of those patterns, which were previously limited by the lack of real group communication tools, have now reappeared.
Help yourself. Enjoy the food. Hope you like it.
Okay, yeah, it smells amazing.
In the beginning, it was kind of interesting because I joined. I wasn't really quite sure what I was going to find out. So I saw there was a meeting, and I said, well, let me see how the people look like. Because you never know, internet, these sort of things could be a bunch of freaks. But getting there, sitting down, talking to them, I said, well, wonderful. They're open-minded people. They talk about travels. There are so much in common that I said, wonderful. I started joining and coming to the meetings.
It's just like a big group of people that most of them you know are already past some kind of barrier. Right. Wherever you go, you can just immediately make a connection with somebody.
That I like going,
There's more than 500,000 members, 1,500 people meeting up per night to sleep on each other's couches.
Can you trust the first thing that comes up when you search on Google for a bit of information about a health condition you have? Can you trust that more than the doctor? The fact that if you have lots and lots of people collaborating and sharing information, actually the good rises to the top, and there's a kind of self-policing that's going on.
I've seen bad advice, and if there is bad advice, you can guarantee that people afterwards are going to say, no, ignore such and such a person. They don't know what they're talking about. If you've got one post that says, do this, and then you've got 25 posts afterwards saying, don't listen to them, they haven't got a clue, then you're not going to listen to them.
The more people you have involved, the more people you have kind of tending to the information that's being shared, that is a way of ensuring quality.
It's not like you get advice from one person, you'll get advice from 25, 30 people within minutes. It's like you post a thread, now though, I'm the one running along, like, oh look, I know that thread, I can post you the links. But yes, You want a vaginal birth? Oh, of course you can have one. Here you go. Have a look at this. This is the reasons.
You would trust other mums more than you would trust, the health service or, government policy or, best practice papers about how to bring up children and so on. And so the motivation to kind of network on a peer-to-peer basis and help each other is quite high. And so, it's a very simple economic model in terms of how you invest your time and your attention.
Hello, welcome to Directionless Inquiries.
I'm trying to find the nearest cash machine. I'm outside Shoreditch Church on Shoreditch High Street.
Okay. The basic idea is this, is that if you're out on the street and you've got a mobile phone, you phone this number and you're connected to somebody that happens to be able to answer a question that you need to know.
The London number is directed really at people who've registered for the system and have expressed the fact that they know something about London or about a particular part of London. So you can phone that number and you'll be connected to people with that local knowledge.
It's basically like a virtual telephone exchange.
Yeah.
Here we go. And basically phone up a number and they'll tell me, just tell us anything you want to know.
I don't really mind talking to somebody in a call centre in Bangalore, but it isn't always the best place to get information about what's happening next door to you or down your street. And especially if you're stuck somewhere and you need to get to a pub that you don't know the name of, or you've lost the details of where this or that is.
It's quite nice just to be able to help someone on the way by giving them directions, for example, or by just imparting a bit of your wisdom that you've gained over the many years of being on this planet.
Yeah.
There is something in the fact that that kind of gift economy has always been there. It's just that it's remained invisible, and partly what kind of social media is beginning to do is bring that gift economy out into the open to make it more tangible.
The cost to you of sharing one piece of information is a lot less than the benefit that you get back from, everybody else's information. So, it's like the old adage, you got one thing to teach and you've got lots and lots of things to learn. And I think that model is present in many of these sites and these phenomena.
If a system can actually give people responsibility and actually allow them to act in a positive way, then they would do that. They would do that with gusto.
They're connecting on the basis of highly relevant similarities. It's not generic do-gooding. This is highly specific and highly individualised, and therefore far more powerful. Whether it's travelling on a budget, or whether it's being a mother, or whether it's being someone who feels they need a bit of help from a friendly stranger who's been in the same situation. Everything can be fulfilled by allowing people to help each other.
So far through Elaine, I've met quite a few people, and within just a few days, I've already hung out and met tons of people in a city that seems otherwise unfriendly.
Nice. Finding manner of weird shit.
Okay. Yeah. Exactly. And
It's just the beginning of this fantastic phenomenon. It's really a very powerful force for good, the potential for people to connect in this way.
It's just about creating the circumstances that allows people to do that. And I think that, there's so much stuff out there which kind of treats people as if they're going to mess things up, or they're incompetent. And I think that our approach to people is that generally they are competent, and that they might mess things up occasionally, but if you offer them an opportunity to help, they will gladly take it, and they will get a warm feeling, as I always get a warm feeling from doing the stuff that I do.
What's happened in the 20th century, I think, was really the anomaly. We're actually seeing a reversion to a very common and deep human pattern of doing things because we like each other, doing things because we care for each other, doing things to get recognition and to get sort of reputational capital.
There are collaborative ways of working and doing things which deliver the public service outcome far better than the old model.
People will increasingly expect to be able to make choices, to be able to express themselves, to stand up and be counted in more than just a number and a vote or a tick. So how will governments relate to people who are more empowered?
If you look at how public services work currently, it's very much they're built on a model of each of us being kind of passive consumers. So actually we're beginning to understand that public services need to start not with kind of problems and needs, but instead with people and what they can bring. And I think the reason people want to get involved is because they feel they have something to give back. And I think that's something that all public services are going to need to grapple with.
These hugely centralised approaches have got huge dangers, and I think they overlook the fact that people are naturally collaborative and cooperative, and that different versions of the same technologies are now available to everybody, so people can work together in ways that ask a deeper question about the role of government.
In the past, we've needed institutions. These days, we have mechanisms for joining together lots of individuals based on their own self-interest that are now competitive with the power of institutions.
Hierarchies are very inefficient, they're very slow-moving, they concentrate power and information at the top, and they often deny people opportunities to take initiative, to share ideas and to seek solutions themselves, and they often rob people of a sense of agency.
The big shift I think that's going on is the idea that everyone is available for group action. Doesn't mean everyone will participate in group action, it doesn't mean that all participation will be equal, but it does mean that everybody can get involved.
We all own a team called Ebbsfleet United. There's about 30,000 of us members online. We'll log in online, make our team decisions, make all the vote proposals. We basically run the club now.
Well, that's gone out of play for an Ebbsfleet throw. I think every stop in play, goal kick, bit of time wasting.
Some people see this as just like a champ manager football game, but it's not, it's real life. Now, big choice. Who's going to play up front? Yeah, Big John Kindy.
John Kindy tries to challenge. Michael Bostwick puts it out of play.
You can turn institutions upside down using the net. You can design systems or institutions from the bottom up and let them self-organise.
I always go with Lance Cronin because he represents England at semi-professional level.
How do you see this half going, Tim?
I want Ebbsfleet to tuck the ball up their jumper and sit down and not let Aldershot get a hold of it. The rain's starting to come down a bit harder now.
We've lived here all our lives. I started going when I was about 8 or 9 with my grandfather, long term.
I think the way the voting will go, it will select the best available team.
Now, got to have Stacey Long on the wing.
Right back, we usually like to pick Mark Ricketts. He's only just come back from injury.
You know what, he did well last game. I think I might try him there. Let's put Sasha at left back.
In a way, it is less personal, right, to take advice from 30,000 people than from one arrogant person. And if you get it right, taking your cue from 30,000 people actually creates a much better chance that one person isn't going to be making a kind of catastrophic mistake. I'm sure it feels very different in the management suite.
And then we've got at left back Sasha Opinel. He's been brilliant all season.
If you just open yourselves up,
strikers,
you find that there's all these kind of resources out there.
Kindy, Michael Bostwick.
He's good with crosses.
And all this kind of expertise out there that could be incredibly valuable to you.
But then he's only 18, along with 1 or 2 others.
Okay. And that is my team. Save. Ebbsfleet United, they're playing in the semi-final today of the FA Trophy against Aldershot, and we're 3-1 up from the first.
Let's go. See you later then. Ta-da. Bye. Should be a good game today, actually, Rick.
Absolutely. Biggest game for years and years for us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've never been to Wembley before.
In this self-organising model, it can be very low cost and very efficient compared with top-down bureaucratic hierarchy. Just compare open source software in Microsoft. Microsoft spends billions to develop products which are less sophisticated than Linux. Linux is this large open source software writing community. Linux doesn't have a head office. It doesn't have any corporate jets. It doesn't have any away days. It doesn't have any human resources department. It has none of the stuff that large organisations have, and yet it manages to produce something which is reliable and is used by governments all over the world.
The code is out there. I mean, just use it. I mean, it's free. You can submit your own patches if you're a programmer. Maybe you're not a programmer. Maybe you just give feedback to developers. Go on forums, say, oh, this software's very good, but maybe, I'm not a programmer, but I'd really like to see this feature. A lot of developers are very open to ideas.
So it's starting to get into all sorts of systems people take for granted, as well as just the desktop PC. Banks are all heavy users of Linux. A lot of it on services used across the internet, people like Google, Amazon, at home in things like televisions these days, mobile phones. We've had people do things like wire the speedometer data into their music system. So as they pass a certain speed, it starts playing Why Did the Valkyries to remind them to slow down. Because you can actually tinker with all this stuff, it gives you an enormous power to customise it to your own taste.
What someone else put in might benefit thousands and thousands of other people. And by having that collaboration and having, people get their say and other people contribute to the code, you can get more valuable software. You're not just getting what one person wants with software.
For leaders in an online world, the critical thing is not to feel threatened. I think it is about letting go. It's a tricky thing being a kind of a leader of a herd of cats.
If 30,000 people came over and said, you should do this, who feels a bit harsh to him, but he says he supports it and he thinks it's a great idea.
You hope that it's going to be helpful and not go the other way, and I'm sure everyone's working for it to make a good partnership and run as smoothly as possible.
I think with team selection, ultimately it will come down to the forums.
But you've got to be very brave, haven't you, to accept the decisions?
You're going into something that's not got any real history or evidence to back anything up. So you're stepping into a little bit of the unknown, and we might have to make mistakes to go forward because it's so new.
Meg Whitman, who used to run eBay, said it was like leading a town meeting. It basically means that when you're leading anything, it becomes a political job, because what you're dealing with is not people you can instruct and tell. You have to persuade and win their support.
It's a real art, and it's a different kind of art than what we think of as management in the classic sense.
The people who make the transition best from being, what I would call manager to leader are the people who are comfortable with letting go.
It would be really interesting to get Gordon Brown and ask him whether he'd be prepared for his job to be changed in the way that Liam Daish's job has been changed. Would he be happy, really, to have that level of participation? They talk about evidence-based policies, and they talk about being the servants and not the masters, but would he really like to have people driving his decisions in that sort of way?
Well, I'm not sure about that. This is a football club. I'm not talking about, the world or the country and all that, the nation. I don't know if that would work. It could get a little bit of anarchy, but no, this is new. It's interesting, and we're giving it a good crack.
Ultimately, I assume I don't know him obviously, but I assume that the real proof is in the pudding, right? If he wins more games, he's going to be happy to be in the situation he's in than if he loses a lot of games. And so it's the kind of record that will play out over time. We'll see how that football team does.
So did you pick the team this morning? I did 4-4-2. He kept it nice and simple.
I always picked George Purcell anyway. Did you pick Chris McPhee to play right back?
Yes.
So did I.
Well, Fleet kick-off. This is possibly the biggest game in Ebbsfleet United's history. So much riding on it. A trip to Wembley beckons. Well, Ebbsfleet lining up. Barrett collects and he's gone over the top to Chucky. Chucky will get to this. A cross put in. John Akindi looking for it, but not quite getting to it.
More and more people, either because they grew up in that world or because they've learned about this world, take it for granted that they can get involved, that they can interact. Take it for granted that there is significant wisdom and value in interacting with other people in groups that don't have all the kind of classic infrastructure, but are nevertheless tremendously important and engaging.
Referee blows his whistle. Tim, we got to be happy.
Still got that 3-1 aggregate lead. We've looked like we might create chances in this half. We've weathered the storm that they...
So you reckon, any subs?
For us, no, it's no need.
I consider Chucky coming off 20 minutes, then we can get on the computer and tell Liam to bring on the sub.
Well, these players, these Ebbsfleet players, are 45 minutes from their destiny. Chris McPhee clears.
If Ebbsfleet turn into a real success, then that's evidence that a participative decision-making process can lead to good results.
That's a real vital point of the game so far. Half an hour to glory for Ebbsfleet United. Aldershot really looking dangerous again. A little dink through. He is through, and it's a goal to Aldershot Town. The linesman didn't give offside.
At the end of the day, communities don't work unless decisions get taken.
Ebbsfleet United there were playing
And so the communes in the 1960s and 70s in America, thousands of communes failed, largely because they couldn't take decisions.
You can imagine a team of surgeons being preferable, and a team of trained surgeons being preferable to 35,000 people trying to move the knife.
He's able to pick his spot, and that's Aldershot 1-0 up.
It's not a recipe that's going to work in every single situation.
Well, that's ramped the nerves up a significant amount. Tension really is a factor now. Not too sure how Liam does reassuring and comforting, but he'll certainly be geeing up his men for these last 8 minutes plus added time to go, unless we see, of course, extra time, which would be the case if Aldershot managed to score. Paul McCarthy has this covered though, plays the ball back to Lars Cronin, who was forced to clear.
Nail-biting moments these for Ebbsfleet.
I think the problem is the team, and we're all so close to Wembley, to have it snatched away now would just be horrible.
Keep the ball, Fleet! Keep the ball! He was there with the ball a minute ago! Come on, get on with it!
And then George Purcell's on top of it. He's in the corner. He plays it inside. Can it finish in style? He's Stacey Long. And it's in the net. I don't know who scored, but I don't care. It's in the net, and the Fleet are going to Wembley. 1-1, and the Fleet on aggregate lead 4-1. The Fleet are going to Wembley.
It's the massive advantage of just opening yourself up.
What a roll!
We are taking a team to Wembley. Well, it hasn't sunk in yet. So I said to me, back in August, you're going to be picking a team that plays out Wembley. I've not believed it. So amazing.
The desire to collaborate with other people and get that sense of what I'm doing is useful and meaningful has always been there, but basically the barriers to entry have gone down rapidly over the last 10 years. And so now you're starting to see it really become the mainstream.
I picked most of that team, and we are going to Wembley. And you feel that's been achieved in part on your selection.
The proponents of participative government could say, here is evidence that you know, the wisdom of the crowds is right, and that listening to everybody is a good idea, and that instead of doing phony consultations, you should probably do real consultations about issues that people really care about.
The major change is that, you know, institutions are now threatened in terms of their power relations by groups of individuals who can actually organise to change things.
Across the spectrum, from banking, education, health, through to entertainment and culture, you'll see a gradual move over the next 2 decades towards much more open models of organisation. And that's a very, very powerful recipe.
Throughout the 20th century, we created wealth through the vertically integrated corporation. It did everything from soup to nuts. Why does the firm exist? If markets are the best mechanism for determining how goods and resources are allocated, why isn't everybody an independent contractor at every step along the way in production? The answer is collaboration costs. Because the web drops collaboration costs, consumers can now produce.
You can be a bank manager. You basically have got control over what you're doing, who you're lending money to, and what interest rate you want to set.
I don't think we have a sort of conventional customer-supplier relationship. So it started with us saying to our users, we've been approached by a film company making a documentary. I'll add the press release below. They're looking to interview a lender and hear all about their personal experience at Zopa. Adrian, or Adelos as we know him, responded, said, Amanda has said no, as our house is a mess at the moment. I've just pinged off an email asking if filming could be in another location, we'll let you know. So he then says, I've spoken to film company this evening, made my demands for red and green M&Ms only. That was the first thing I asked for, and for tea to be made with milk from the male yak. We're different, and we've captured the imagination, and consumers like us. And banks would love it if their consumers like them.
I've been in business now for about 8 years, and the bank always make you feel guilty, firstly, about borrowing. And then all the pomp and ceremony that has to go with it, with regards to the paperwork and, you know, declaring your soul, really. These are people that have lent me the money. They've all lent me in denominations of 10s, 20s, 30s, £40. Weird that I know how old they are. And then Mr. Lender, who's 70. He's putting £20 of his pension. It's bizarre where they live. But I guess that's the whole point of it, isn't it? It's to, you know, to bring you closer to your community and to the people that are helping you.
Basically, my part-time hobby is as a mobile DJ. We do all types of venues, parties.
In purely pragmatic terms, financially, we need the bigger lenders more than we need the smaller lenders. But we also need a sense of community, and therefore anyone who wants to invest their time and energy in that sense of community is fantastic.
Yeah, basically developing a community and a company around its users. So the actual company is changing all the time to match what the users are wanting and what they're suggesting.
We think of customers as only being outside the boundaries of companies. The customer is out there. We do market research. We understand our customers. We push products out to them through traditional mass media. Well, now customers can be brought inside a business web where customers can co-innovate value and can co-create value.
This one here, I'm interested in bidding on the second one down. It's again similar to like an eBay style thing. He's wanting to buy £3,000 to buy a car outright, and so he doesn't need to get HP vehicle finance. The Zopa rate of 10% works out roughly at £260 a month, where with a HP, the amount is £386 a month. Meaning he'll actually be able to reduce his monthly outgoings. I'm actually going to put in a bid now, and to be honest, I'll probably come in around the 9%. So I'll offer him £10.
Well, I mean, central tenet of the business is that people work together. So there is intrinsically a human element of what we do, which isn't in a bank. I think where banks have got themselves into trouble is by optimising their returns from consumers and in some ways being seen to charge disproportionate amounts to people who are actually probably the most vulnerable people who can't necessarily afford to pay it. And wouldn't it be fairer if people who bounced a direct debit or went overdrawn for a day were charged a fee that was appropriate to their crime?
A court case began today which might produce that very rare event, a bank giving money to its customers. Hundreds of thousands of people are affected. Maybe it's they who've bought sufficient copies of a single on the subject for it to burst into the charts yesterday at number 25.
I fought the Lloyds and the Lloyds lost. They even paid the interest and the court costs. At first they sent me letters saying, "Dear Sir, madam, get lost." But I fought the Lloyds and the Lloyds lost. Oh.
The music world's going through an evolution, and we haven't got to the end yet. At the moment, we've got to the point where the old model is widely considered to be dead. It's a crushingly harsh industry. People who do get a record deal, of those, 95% of them typically get dumped after their first album. A large proportion never even get to make an album, even though they have a record deal. And probably 1 in 1,000 end up making a lifetime career out of it. And therefore I figured there had to be a better way of actually discovering music. Over and above discovering music, actually producing music. Slice the Pie is a financing engine for the music industry. Our core function is to connect music fans and credible bands and allow the fans to finance a professional production of an album and then share the proceeds with the people who have actually put up the finance.
Essentially, it's like a virtual gig, if you like. You know, all the bands will get together, put all their songs in, then all the people will vote on there. Yeah, get scouted, all the people will vote, and then you get whittled down to like the last 15.
It's not such a vote, is it, in the arena? It's more of a rating. They kind of rate your track.
The good thing about it is, you know, you can scroll down, you can see all the reviews that people have put. Sounds very much like The Jam, nice upbeat. You know, they've given us 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10, 6 out of 10. There's a 9 out of 10. Even if we didn't win the actual showcase, I think it's quite good to actually get some feedback on your songs anyway.
Under kind of no pressure to give you a good review because they don't know who you are anyway.
Yeah.
Whereas if you met someone in a gig, they'd feel kind of more pressured.
Yep.
To not tell you the truth.
And we don't know who they are either, so like if someone gives us a shit review, you know, we can't go and hunt them down and string them up by the nuts and beat them to a pulp.
You're going to have people from all over the world giving their own honest, independent opinions, so it's a very, very reliable way of actually filtering music. It's not an X factor, it's about genuinely using your wisdom and your experience to influence who ends up making an album and who ends up succeeding in the industry, and that's quite intoxicating to a large slice of the population.
People do it because it's fun, because they don't like the traditional publishing industry. They do it as a hobby. They do it for intellectual stimulation. There are lots of reasons.
I could put money in a bank, and that bank could be lending it out anywhere in the world to, you know, regimes or anything. You don't know what they're doing with your money.
They're very open and very honest. You can go on and see how simple it is and how they go on about how they make money. I mean, they're not hiding anything. You don't see a web page on NatWest's or Abbey National's web page saying how we make money.
There's been an expression for a long time that you do well by doing good. And I don't think it's been true in the past. Lots of companies did well by being really bad, by being monopolies or having terrible labor practices or having lousy products that they put a lot of money into advertising and sales. And companies are having to clean up, not because of regulation, they're having to clean up because of market forces and the power of transparency.
We don't have a brand value or a sort of a mantra that says, you know, we will declare every mistake we ever make. It's more, well, that people are going to find out about our mistakes, and we do make them, so better to tell them than let them find out.
So every company is becoming naked. And if you're going to be naked, well, fitness is no longer an option. Or if you're going to be naked, you better be buff.
We don't fundamentally, I mean, I don't want to sound too sanctimonious here, but I don't think we do anything that's fundamentally bad. So therefore, we don't have to be ashamed of any fee we charge or way we behave.
I think before we won this money with Slice the Pie, but we're doing probably like maybe, I'd say like 3 gigs a month for like, you know, for maybe a year. And like for all that hard work to kind of pay off, you know, like it's nice to actually kind of be where we want it to be.
We've got a huge fan base. We're signed to a lovely label that lets us have complete artistic control over all our albums.
That's the thing, it's not a label.
We're not controlled into releasing something that they want us to release. We release whatever we want to do.
Just to pass the time, I get a job like mine. I'll maybe drive a bus. I check the tickets and be one of us. But there is no evidence of you.
The music industry has been extraordinarily well disintermediated, to use a piece of horrible jargon. Yeah, is it so far-fetched to think that other industries will follow? I think we get talked about, so I think in the sort of corridors of power we get talked about, and they therefore think, well, hang on a minute, this could be quite interesting. So if this grew to a multiple of its current size, then actually it's quite a threat.
This is no longer about hooking up online or creating a gardening community. This is becoming a new mode of production. And it's beginning to fundamentally change the way that we orchestrate capability in society, the way that we innovate and create goods and services. And the corporation is going through, I think, the biggest change in a century.
I think the losers will be the people who say, I'll always make better decisions. The winners will be the ones that are more open-minded and understand that the world is changing and the internet is a huge opportunity to make things better. It shouldn't always be looked at as a threat.
The change in the relationship between customers and companies is mirrored in the relationship between citizens and their governments.
If you could actually combine that innate intelligence, millions of different diverse opinions from people who have different perspectives, you would end up with fantastic policies.
They go from incompetence to complacency, and there are questions about his integrity. Aren't people rightly asking now, is this man simply not cut out for the job?
Prime Minister, our party that brought in legislation in 2000 to restrict foreign
Right
donors.
now, the whole model of policy development and arguably of democracy is a broadcast model. It goes like this. I'm a politician. Listen to my advertisements and debates, then go and vote for me, and then I'm going to broadcast to you for 4 years, and then we get to do it all over again. You vote, I rule.
Government in Britain is based on the party system. And although the elector marks his cross against the name of an individual, he is in fact casting a vote in support of a party program.
This model is inappropriate for the 21st century.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I'm not talking about people lobbying government or outside parties influencing government. I'm talking about, in some ways, unbundling and reconstituting what is a government.
I think there's a great potential for decision-making to start actually on a ground level, on a far less grand stage than Parliament deciding about immigration laws, but actually about really participatory budgeting.
I represent a model railway club, and we're looking for some funding to purchase track. And this event, they've got £20,000 up for grabs, and the community to decide where the money goes.
Well, today I'm going to try and get some funding for playground equipment for the children at the school.
I have nominated a project which is to regenerate a churchyard at Morecambe Parish Church. The whole idea is that the people of Poulton, and only the people of Poulton, will vote on each project, and the £20,000 will be given away this afternoon.
Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to start proceedings in 5 minutes.
Each group is going to have a 3-minute presentation, and we are going to have to keep it
very strictly to 3 minutes.
Let's start off then. We have David from Morecambe Parish Church.
We know that people's perception that they can participate in decision-making is a key driver, has a direct correlation with levels of trust and satisfaction.
I therefore commend this project to you and ask for your vote this afternoon.
Now, we know that both trust and satisfaction are taking a bit of a dive in the public sector at the moment, so actually there does seem to be a correlation between the sense that people can influence decisions and trust and satisfaction. Doesn't necessarily mean that they do, but it's that sense that they can.
I'd like to hand you over now to Ebony, who'd like to speak.
Hi, my name is Ebony. We would like you to give us a grant for £2,000.
So in order for us to continue, please support our bid.
Hello, I am Dean Harrison. And there's Jack Lord.
When you do it in public and when other people know it's your reputation on the line, right? I can give my mate 10 out of 10 for his little project, but in fact, this business about making the hospital work better in the town I live in,
Evacuation.
like I've actually got to pay some attention to that.
To support our older residents.
Once you deliver something that actually allows people to make a decision, it's incredible how compelling it is, how willing people are to participate in these things, because they are exciting.
Thank you very much for this.
Thanks very much.
That's why people are less engaged in politics in the representative sense, but they're much more engaged in politics in a personal sense in terms of the power that they feel to affect their community, the world around them. I think that's steadily increasing as their trust in representative politicians is steadily decreasing.
We got the money. Oh, it was absolutely superb. We had a really good day. We were really chuffed by it all, and everybody that's been involved is absolutely delighted with it.
Right, guys. Yesterday, Jack and I went. As you know, we went to the In Your Hands. It was unsuccessful. We didn't get enough votes.
I mean, although we weren't successful at that time. I mean, it opened my eyes up to how many other different organisations, were in the area.
But at least the people are making a decision.
Yeah, for the community, it was a good idea.
I don't think the money was spent on anything that didn't deserve it, so...
Is this the first one?
This is the first one, yeah.
Yeah, right. It's the first time I'd heard of it. I'd never heard of it before. Right.
So we know better next time. If there's another event like that, we know better.
Right. It was a learning curve.
You don't have to get your way to feel enfranchised. What actually comes of giving people responsibility for decision-making is they really care about the decisions of the minorities within a group, and that people are very willing to compromise, and that compromise is easily achievable once everybody's cards are on the table and people can really understand the viewpoints at work.
Democracy is a lot more than majority rule on a nightly basis. The technology is becoming possible for millions of people to have a conversation.
The assumption that people will be included is spreading so widely and so deeply. That, I think, is going to be a big driver of governmental change. It's not just when it becomes an option for the people in elected office, but also an expectation of their constituents.
It's just that now we have, a mass consumer technology that supports this, and so we're only now beginning to discover what we can do with it.
In a country where clearly voter turnout levels are pretty low, lots of people believe that politicians don't work for them, where lots of people feel that nothing they can do matters or in any way has any impact at all. It would give citizens a lot more power if they knew a lot of stuff that was currently hidden or effectively secret. But I also think it would enable politicians to run much better government. And this is a thing that I think politicians don't often believe. They tend to think transparency is just something used to harm them. And opacity may hide problems today, but it almost certainly builds the biggest scandals of the sort that then cause politicians real massive trouble. So if I could make them understand anything about this new world, it would be that much greater transparency probably makes them much more electable people.
It is a shift in power. It's a different kind of democracy, in my view. It is seeing representative democracy as playing an important role, and it's also not romanticising the fact that everyone wants to sit on committees.
And of course, for government and politicians, that is a profound challenge to the way politics is normally done, which is, we communicate from on high, from Parliament, from Whitehall, and only once every 4 years or 5 years is there a general election where the public are brought in. Now, I think that's a good thing that this change is happening, but I think it will shake up British politics and indeed politics around the world in a way that people probably haven't anticipated yet.
If you look at what George Osborne is saying and some of the other people in the new wing of the Conservative Party, they appear to understand what's going on in the real world in terms of social networks and MySpace generations and all that kind of stuff. But I think that's partly because they have the advantage of being in opposition for a period of time. Whether they can apply that to government is another question.
Remember, we do have this thing called, which is sort of voting. You know what I mean? Where people get to choose who their representatives are. Do you know what I mean? I mean, politics is quite open to...
Once every 4 years.
Exactly.
Is that enough?
No, it isn't. Definitely not. I mean, I think let me think about how I would put this.
New paradigms cause dislocation and confusion, and they're nearly always received with coolness, or worse, mockery, hostility, invested interest fight against change.
It's very important that the role for government remains, the role for government being to provide the resources for people to make local decisions about how they want money spent in an area. This isn't about sort of a DIY country, because if you had a DIY country without any role for government, then where would the funding come from for all the important things that people want done in a particular area, for example?
I think representative democracy was based on the idea that people are thick. That's not true. I think there's a much more radical thing that will happen, which is basically that people go around the side of representative democracy, and rather than saying, I want to kind of have input on what this politician is deciding in Parliament, they'll do it themselves.
I think what we'll see is just some of the activities and powers of government moving into the public realm, and they will be run better by citizens than they are by government.
Imagine you wanted to build a new railway between London and Birmingham that cut the journey time. How much would that cost? At the moment, the only method of doing that is through taxes. Now, if you were to use the point to do that, completely outside of public policy, you could do it. You could do it. There is this possibility of using these tools to do massive things, which is completely unexplored at the moment.
Broader numbers of people can be engaged in something like policy formation. For example, the Green Party in Canada created its program through a wiki, where all members of the Green Party could come together, just like with Wikipedia, and co-innovate and co-create a political program. And it worked out pretty well.
And actually what these tools are doing are allowing people to make decisions themselves and to work collaboratively in a way that means that representative democracy is less meaningful to them.
There's a whole new model that's emerging where we become part of the government. I call it Government 2.0.
What I think will happen is going to be a much higher degree of hybridization between government and the people, and in particular the groups of people that they serve.
There's a good analogy for the new model of government in terms of the changes in the internet itself. MySpace beats MTV, CNN.com gets eclipsed by Blogger.com. Similarly, with governments, rather than doing everything, could more create a platform whereby citizens and others can self-organize to create better value than what currently exists.
We've seen lots of other changes in the past that, could potentially lead to a better world, but actually result in, First World War trench warfare or, genocide in the Second World War, for example. So I think, we should be careful about having too utopian a vision, for how these things will play out.
Of course, there are lots of challenges in doing something like this. There'll be saboteurs. There'll be some people who won't have access to the web. There's the whole complexity of millions of ideas and how these get aggregated together and the good ones come to the fore. But these are all in the category of implementation challenges. They're not in the category of reasons not to do it.
In any revolution, there are downsides. But I'm optimistic that we're living through what economists would call a positive supply-side shock to the amount of freedom in the world. More people can say more things to more people than ever in history, and that is still growing enormously. And I think in the times when we've seen enormous increases in intellectual or political freedom, there has certainly been a period of chaos immediately afterwards, but that over the long haul, the values of those changes have been not just mainly positive, but enormously positive for society.
We will have a form of government that engages and understands and knows what to do with what people are saying.
It's a politics where you can help as well as just say what you want, and that's an amazing thing. And at the moment we're starting to see that with some online projects. But imagine if a country was run like that, or imagine if even just a town was run like that. In the way that we're starting to see football clubs run like that, I think that's a sign of things to come.
As time goes on, we will see people increasingly comfortable participating in situations where the social value is really about other people caring enough rather than someone being paid to provide that value. And where the end point of that is, I don't know. But I do think the end result is going to be quite profound.